Kendria with Mann Lake. We're back here in Central US for the March beekeeping buzz. Just remember and keep in mind, you still don't want to get in those hives unless it's over 50 degrees and sunny. However, now you should be getting a more accurate count on what hives you still have that are viable, and also the hives that you may need to replace this upcoming year. Be sure to get those pre-orders in for our package bees and nukes. And if you're planning on doing any splits, you're going to want to get those queen orders in a timely manner. So for early March, you may want to start feeding those hives as they're coming into that early spring season. This will enhance the queen's laying pattern. Using a pollen substitute such as the dry Ultra Bee or even the Ultra Bee Plus Patty are alternates for that pollen that you might not be seeing in your area just yet. You're going to also want to feed some kind of liquid feed such as the Pro Sweet or a sugar water. I myself love to mix in with some Pro Health just for some additives for colony health. Speaking of colony health, right now is going to be when you're going to want to get those mite counts in. I like using the Easy Check with an alcohol wash for the most accurate count for me. A couple of treatments that I keep on deck, of course, are the oxalic acid vaporizer and oxalic acid. The Apiguard, Apivar, and Apistan are a couple of my favorites. I'm looking forward to adding the VarroxSan to part of my treatment plan for my hives. In about mid-March, you're going to see that queen's laying pattern probably increasing, especially if you're using that pollen substitute to increase that. That may be a time whenever you're going to have to rotate those boxes. Bees naturally try to move to the most upper top box, and you want to put them down into the bottom box so they naturally move from bottom to top. That could mean that you have to switch those boxes back and forth. It is literally as easy as rotating those boxes around for yourself. These boxes, however, can weigh up to 100 pounds, so be sure that you're cautious whenever using too deeps, that this could be something that you run into in the spring season. So another reason you're going to want to rotate those boxes and to keep them forced down into the box to naturally move up, of course, is to prevent swarming. Speaking of swarming, you're going to want to go ahead and get those swarm etiquettes in your kit, of course. I love to keep a swarm trap and a couple of swarm lures on hand just in case. We don't like our bees to swarm or abscond, but just in case we can catch those back and rehive those into a new hive. So with spring just around the corner, I don't know if you're like me, but there's nothing better than trading out your old nasty gear for some updated new gear that's much needed. I don't know how it could get much better, except for Mann Lake is actually offering a discount code for new year, new gear. If you haven't had a chance to check out that video, be sure to go ahead and click on that. It's in our comments so that you can sign up for our new gear, new year. I hope that you've enjoyed this content. If you are ever questioning anything beekeeping related, be sure to comment below. We're happy to help in any way that we can. If you feel like it's a little bit more extensive than a comment can handle, be sure to reach out to our 1-800 number. One of our sales reps will be happy to assist you in any way that they can.
Ed Wagoner here, Mann Lake Sales Office, Hackensack, Minnesota. We've had some nice spring-like weather lately. It's most of our snow is gone. However, it's still winter, and we will probably still see some more snow before spring truly gets here. So what should you be doing right now? If you're a new beekeeper, find a class, find a beekeeper club in your community, find a neighbor that keeps bees. Find someone that will help you get going in this hobby, get going with this endeavor. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot to learn, and the beekeeping clubs, the courses, and again, the neighbor. Find a neighboring beekeeper. Experienced beekeepers are always willing to share what they know. You trade your labor for their knowledge. If you have bees that wintered over, it's time to think about what you need to do with those so that you can get them through this late winter period into spring. Find a nice enough day. I think it's got to be above 50 degrees. Wind, sun are definitely going to be factors. If it's a little cooler outside, then you definitely don't want to go out there if it's breezy. You don't want to open a hive and let all that heat out. because it's windy. So get in, get out, don't linger in the hive. But what you want to do is you want to add some sugar syrup to that hive to help them get through winter. And then a pollen substitute, a pollen patty, is real good too. Both of these products, the syrup mimics honey, the patty mimics pollen, and they'll need those so that they can boost their colony numbers going into spring. Consider your spring mite treatments as well. Spring is a great time to do that initial mite treatment. You're coming out of a brood break. Because there's no brood in there, you're not going to have any of those lingering mites there. All the mites should be exposed and should be ready to be attacked by a miticide. So do your research on miticides, find one that works for you, and get that in your hive promptly, okay? All right, so it's been a tough winter for honeybee colonies this year. Lots of losses across the country, lots of very high losses across the country. Some commercial beekeepers have lost 70% or more of their colonies. Researchers are collecting dead bees to find out these reasons why. Exposure to pesticides is certainly part of it, loss of habitat certainly part of it, and then pathogens, of course. Your Varroa mites are a heavy contributor to some of those losses. What can you do as a beekeeper or a potential beekeeper to help this out? Be a good beekeeper. A good beekeeper keeps their mite levels low and keeps their colony health high. You can also plant things. Contact your county extension office and they'll have a list of pollinating plants that work in your area that are beneficial to honeybees. That's all I got for now. I hope you have a good spring.
Hello and welcome to another beekeeping buzz for the Northeast region. This video is for what to do in the month of March. And I'm Kim, and Wendy is behind the camera today. She did help, we were outside, but the weather is not cooperating, so we decided to take the rest of the video inside. Checking hives could be difficult in March as weather fluctuates and we could still get snow and cold temperatures. If you haven't done so already, now is a good time to do a quick inspection, just focusing on looking for food stores and overall hive health, but avoid doing a full frame inspection. Wait until temps are consistently about 50 degrees Fahrenheit to do a more thorough inspection. Check for signs of bee activity, like food stores, dead bees, any signs that the queen is laying. Seeing eggs is a great sign of a healthy colony. Looking for yellow waste matter outside of the hive indicates they have been coming out for cleansing flights, which they will do more and more of as the weather gets warmer. You want to add food if needed. March is a tough month as bees can run out of food before getting to forage. Looking for signs of pests or disease such as mites, small hive beetles, wax moth, foul brood, or nosema. Set up a plan on how to treat these issues as the weather warms up. If you check and you have a dead out, it's understandable to be disappointed. When we had gone outside, we wanted to check for any dead outs that we had in our apiary. So we did focus on that. We did take a hive and we looked through it. We noticed it had an abundance of hive beetles and the bees had died in a small cluster. You don't want to get too discouraged. So it is worth it to take the time and to take those frames and to try to figure out what happened. And if you're part of a local beekeeping association, there are mentors who can help you know what to look for. But I hope that you can accept that this happens to all of us at some point. Every beekeeper has experienced a dead out. And don't let it discourage you from beekeeping. We are still taking orders for packages and nukes. So if you have already looked and you have any kind of dead outs or you don't have your bees anymore, please give us a call or check the website and get yourself a new package of bees this year. Ensure that your hive is properly secured at this time and that everything is assembled properly because, you know, with the weather and we had a lot of wind here as well. So some of our telescoping covers had fallen off. And you want to strap it down in case of severe winds. So we went out and did that with the rest of the hives. It may be too soon to add some pollen substitute in the beginning of March, but you'd have to check how your weather is and what's going on, anything that you see tree-wise that may have buds. But by the second and third week of March, again, depending on the weather, you might want to add a pollen patty to your hive. Adding a pollen patty is to give them a source of protein that they aren't able to get in nature. But you have to be careful adding a pollen patty, as this will stimulate brood production. And you will need to make sure that you're feeding your bees, or that they have enough of their own honey to eat if no other sources are available in nature. Pollen patties can provide the bees with essential nutrients for healthy brood development, colony growth, and overall bee health during times when the bees cannot readily access pollen from flowers. We also have a video available on the different types of pollen patties that we sell and their benefits. This is the Ultra Bee Rocket Fuel pollen patty, which we strongly recommend. And in case you weren't sure, when you want to put your pollen patty in your hive, you're going to put it in between your brood boxes. So whatever type of box you're using for your brood box, you'd want to take this off, and you'd want to put your pollen patty right in the middle of those brood boxes. Some of the earliest pollen sources are trees like pussy willows, red maple, and alder. And as March continues, keep an eye on the weather and what begins to flower. More and more bees will be out and about. As spring begins, you will need to be ready to make splits if your bees are thriving, and decide which method you want to do. We also sell queen bees that are available for pre-order now. If you have any question about today's video, please leave us a comment, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. Our first bee package pickup date for Wilkes-Barre, PA is April 5th, so be sure to order those packages now. We will be having a class March 22nd at our Wilkes-Barre location on how to install a package of bees. It's extremely helpful for beginners, but even those needing a refresher course. Let us know how your bees are doing so far, if you've checked them, if you've added a pollen patty in March yet, or when you plan to do so. And we'd love to hear from you and answer any questions that you have. We look forward to seeing you.
Hello beekeepers, and welcome back to the March edition of Beekeepers Buzz. Today we're going to talk about some things that you can do as a beekeeper to prepare your colony to be successful as we're coming out of the winter months and into the spring. So as you're getting those warmer temperatures and you're able to crack that hive open and do a hive inspection, here's a couple things that you want to look out for and a couple things that you may want to consider as you're going through your hive. One, this time of year, you should start seeing an increased brood production from that queen. With the warmer temperatures and the longer daylight hours, that queen should naturally start produce more eggs. So as you're going through your hive, you want to see a nice solid brood pattern from that queen. If you don't see that and the temperatures are right, now as a beekeeper might be the time that you might want to consider replacing that queen to start the season off with a fresh queen. Second thing you want to look for as you're going through there is resources. How much resources do they still have available in that hive? With that increased brood production, you want to start seeing a lot of pollen, a lot of bee bread in that hive. You also want to start, you want to see honey, especially if you're in an area where you could potentially start seeing or could see cold snaps, maybe even some snow this time of year, or maybe increased rainfall. Anything that's going to keep those bees inside that hive, you want to make sure that they have ample amount of resources, so that way you as a beekeeper can prevent starvation with that colony. So if you're not seeing those things inside the hive as you're going through, maybe it's time to consider adding some sugar syrup to that hive to supplement that nectar, or maybe even a pollen patty to help with that increased brood production. Third thing, as you're going through that hive, you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for early warning signs of swarming. Now is the time that we're entering into that swarm season, so you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for increased queen cells, especially along the bottom of the frames. Could be an indication that that hive could be ready to swarm. Also, with that increased brood production, you're going to see an abundance of bees in there. So if you see quite a lot of bees, a lot of overpopulation, especially if they're hanging out on the outside of the hive, now might be the time to consider adding that second deep if you plan on running double deeps for this season. or even a honey super to give them frames to go ahead and start drawing out and give them a little extra room for those adult bees to get in there. Fourth thing that you want to take a look for, and you always want to monitor, is mites. As you're coming out of the winter, you want to get that mite count and see where your level is at. So now might be the time of year where you're able to get that one last mite treatment on right before that nectar flow starts, depending on what area that you're in. Fourth thing that we want to do as a beekeeper is your equipment. Is it in proper shape? Do you have enough boxes and frames to help to expand to prevent swarming, or to do splits to prevent swarming? So definitely something to keep in mind. Now is kind of the last dire moment that you can do that without having to worry about running out to your local bee store to get those extra supplies as you're seeing the signs for swarming. Another thing that you want to do as a beekeeper is you definitely want to take a look in your area and see what could be blooming or what could potentially start to bloom in the next coming weeks or months. If you're not familiar with your area, reach out to your local beekeeping club. See if there's any beekeepers there that live around you that might be able to help you identify some things. The Mann app has a plant identification camera on it. All you got to do is open up your camera, take a picture, and it will tell you all about the plant. Another valuable resource. Also, another one that isn't talked about too much is plant nurseries. A lot of time these people that are running these plant nurseries have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to local forage in your area, and they might be able to help you out considerably. So those are some things to take a look for, and some things that you might want to consider as we're coming out of the winter into the spring. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to touch on one thing that you might have seen floating around social media or even your local news outlets. This year in the beekeeping community, we're experiencing a lot of losses. I believe the last time we checked the numbers, they're sitting anywhere between 65 to 75% losses from November until this time, 2025. With this making the headlines, there's a lot of things that go into what could potentially be causing these losses, whether it just be an abnormally high mite counts throughout the colonies throughout the country, increased use of pesticides, increased destruction of habitat. These are all things that should be considered when we're talking about these bee losses. And right now they have people researching and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Now what you can do to help, especially the local beekeepers, is shop locally. Buy your local beekeepers honey. Help them support their small business. 2, be aware of the pesticides that you're using in your gardens and around your area. 3, educate people. If you're already aware of this stuff, feel free to spread that information to your neighbors, to your community, to people who may not be that aware of the beekeepers in your local area. 4, support your local bee clubs. That's where they're going to provide this information to new beekeepers and to experienced beekeepers. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're reading and as you're seeing these reports coming in about these large losses. We'll wait and to see what's going on and see what the USDA comes back and says, hey, these are the causes of. But in the meantime, shop local, plant pollinator plants, be careful of the pesticides that you use. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.